Yeah, so the backlash I faced was over my position on lockdowns. I argued that we should have focused protection of vulnerable older people and opening schools and letting younger people live their lives. In October 2020, Francis Collins wrote an email calling me and my colleagues, Martin Kulldorff of Harvard and Sunetra Gupta of Oxford, fringe epidemiologists, and then he called for a devastating takedown, which led to, just media hit pieces, vile attacks on me and my family. It was really quite stressful. What the lab leak, people who allege the lab leak faced in 2020 was very similar, that they were called conspiracy theorists, racist, because they somehow alleging that there was a lab leak was a racist theory. And a lot of that came from the very top of the NIH. It came from people like Tony Fauci and Francis Collins. In 2020, the idea of a lab leak was seen as this sort of crazy idea that only crazy people could have, when in fact, in reality, there were a tremendous number of honest scientists who thought that there was a lab leak. There was considerable evidence in favor of a lab leak. To see Francis Collins now say that it's a matter of honest scientific discussion and debate is absolutely stunning. At the time, when he was the head of the NIH, he could have convened a panel and said, look, let's look into this realistically. Let's look at the evidence for it. Let's have an honest discussion about it. Instead, what he did was he countenanced the destruction of the careers of scientists who disagreed with him, both about lab leak and about lockdowns. He abused his power as head of the NIH to create an illusion of consensus that there was no lab leak, that the lockdowns were going to work, that the school closures were a good idea, when in fact none of that was true. And I'll tell you one other thing is about the Francis Collins's behavior during the pandemic. That abuse of power, I think, in part was motivated by the fact that during the lead up to the pandemic, Francis Collins authorized the conduct of dangerous gain of function research. The abuse of power to suppress the idea of a lab leak looks, in retrospect, very much like a CYA kind of idea, that in order to hide the fact that he had supported this research, he suppressed the lab leak idea, when in fact it looks like it very likely was a lab leak. And I think it's great to finally see some kind of transparency happening on this topic.